Welcome to OrigineX, where history has facts. And today we are getting into something that, well, it directly connects to the device you're holding right now.
Yeah, exactly. The smartphone, the tablet, whatever you're using to listen to this deep dive.
Right, because the physical components of that device, the way it exists in your hands today, is directly tied to a geopolitical murder that happened in a Central African jungle over, 60 years ago.
It really is. And we are not, just to be clear up front, we're not doing some sort of sensationalized true crime story here.
No, definitely not. This is a highly educational, documented historical reckoning. We are looking at the literal structural blueprint of the modern global economy and the absolute extreme lengths that mid-20th century empires went to just secure that blueprint.
Right, which brings us to the core mission of this deep dive. We are exploring the true, fully verified history of Patrice Lumumba.
The very first democratically elected prime minister of the Republic of the Congo.
Exactly, a man who was systematically undermined, overthrown, and then assassinated after just 12 weeks in office.
12 weeks. I mean, think about that. That is no time at all. Our goal today for you, the listener, is to understand not just how he died, but why. Why was a 35-year-old visionary so terrifying to global superpowers? And how does his erasure keep the tech supply chains moving today?
So to really cut through all the decades of Cold War propaganda around this, we are grounding everything in a massive research dossier from the OrigineX Human Archives.
Which is packed with verified sources. Let's lay those out so we know exactly where this is coming from.
Yeah, so we're leaning on 6 major sources. We have the declassified records from the 1975 U.S. Senate Church Committee report.
A crucial one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the 2001 Belgian Parliamentary Commission report. Plus, we're pulling from some definitive historical monographs like Ludo de Witt's book, The Assassination of Lumumba, and Georges Nzangola Ntalaja's text, The Congo, From Leopold to Kabila.
We're also using Crawford Young and Thomas Turner's work on the Zairian state, right?
Yes, and crucially, we're looking directly at the primary text of Lumumba's own speeches from 1960.
Perfect. Now, before we really get into the timeline, we have to issue a very clear impartiality disclaimer to you listening.
Yeah, this is important. We are going to be talking about some intensely charged, politically sensitive Cold War actions here.
We're dealing with covert operations from the highest levels of the U.S. government, the Belgian state, the Soviet Union, all of it. And as your hosts, we are strictly neutral.
Right. We are not endorsing any political ideology. Not capitalist, not communist, nothing.
We take zero sides in these historical conflicts. Our only job today is to impartially report the facts and the verified government investigations exactly as they are in the source material.
Right. So to really understand why a prime minister is assassinated in 1961, we actually have to go back, way back, to the foundation of the state itself.
You're talking about the Berlin Conference, right? 1884, 1885.
Exactly. Because there's this really common misconception that the Congo just started as a normal European colony.
But it didn't.
No, it was a complete anomaly in international law. Between 1885 and 1908, the area we now call the Democratic Republic of the Congo was globally recognized as the Congo Free State, which is just an incredibly dark legal fiction.
Because it wasn't free, and it wasn't really a state.
Right. It was the personal, private, corporate property of one man, King Leopold II of Belgium.
I really need the listener to just sit with that for a second. We are talking about a single private citizen who managed to play all these European rivals against each other to get legal ownership of an estate the size of Western Europe.
Yeah, it's staggering. He didn't govern it for Belgium. He literally held the deed to the land and the millions of people on it.
And he ran it completely outside the bounds of international law. It was just a massive monopoly built purely for extraction.
Pure extraction. And the main engine for that wealth was rubber. Late 19th century, pneumatic tires are invented, electrical wiring is expanding everywhere. The global demand for rubber just explodes.
And Leopold realizes he's sitting on a gold mine. Or a rubber mine, I guess.
Right, a massive windfall. But to get it out, he instituted this regime of systemic terror because he wanted maximum quotas with minimal overhead. So he used this private security force called the Force Public.
Which was what, mostly African auxiliaries commanded by white European officers?
Exactly. And when a local village didn't meet their insane rubber quota, the Force Public would be sent in to, well, punish them.
And this is where the history gets just profoundly disturbing. Because it wasn't just random violence, it was highly bureaucratic.
It was an accounting system. The European officers wanted to make sure their soldiers weren't wasting imported bullets on, hunting animals. They had to prove they used the ammo to suppress the population.
So for every bullet fired,
The soldier had to bring back a severed right hand to his commanding officer.
God, an auditing system based on mass mutilation.
Yeah. And this was completely blown open by a British diplomat named Roger Casement in his 1904 report. He literally documented seeing baskets of smoked, severed hands being delivered to colonial posts.
And the demographic collapse from all of this is just hard to comprehend.
Well, scholars debate the exact math, but the consensus in our monographs points to roughly 10 million people dying between 1880 and 1920.
10 million lives
Hmm.
wiped out by a private corporation's profit margins from direct violence, but also, I imagine, starvation because everyone was forced to harvest rubber instead of farming.
Exactly. The agricultural system collapsed. It's a demographic crater that alters the whole region for centuries. But eventually, the international outrage got so bad that Leopold was forced to hand over his private death camp to the actual Belgian state in 1908.
Which brings us to the formal Belgian Congo era. So does anything actually change when the government takes over, or is it just a rebrand?
It's mostly a rebrand of the extraction. The rubber terror and the hand severing did diminish, but the architecture of pulling wealth out of the country, that just evolved.
They just moved the operation, right?
Yeah, geographically, they moved focus down to the southern province of Katanga. Because rubber was a finite boom, but Katanga has arguably the most concentrated, valuable geology on Earth. Copper, cobalt, tin, diamonds.
And uranium. We have to mention the uranium.
Oh, absolutely. The Belgian state gave these massive concessions to corporate monopolies, the biggest being Union Minière du Haut-Katanga. And during World War II, the highest grade uranium in the world came from their Shinkalabwe mine in the Congo.
Meaning the fissile material used in the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945 that was pulled from Congolese soil.
Yes, it fueled the end of World War II and kicked off the Cold War. But while all this unbelievable wealth is flowing to the West, Belgium is actively stunting the Congolese people.
The architecture of dependency, let's break that down because they did colonialism very differently than, say, the British or the French.
Right. The French and British, for all their horrific violence, usually ended up educating a small local elite. They built universities to create a sort of buffer class to help them run the colony.
But Belgium refused to do that.
Completely refused. Their whole philosophy was intense paternalism. They literally called the Congolese macaques, treating them like grown children who needed strict supervision forever, so they weaponized literacy.
It's just evil genius, honestly. Yeah. They let missionaries teach basic reading so people could read the Bible and do manual labor, but they legally blocked access to higher education.
Yeah, the stats from the OrigineX dossier are wild. By 1960, the year they finally get independence, out of 15 million people in the Congo, there were fewer than 30 university graduates.
30 in the whole country.
And 0 Congolese doctors, 0 Congolese military officers in the force public, 0 engineers, 0 architects, 0 macroeconomic policy experts.
So, to you listening, try to imagine that. Imagine trying to build an entire nation from scratch. A central bank, a healthcare system, an army. And the previous management intentionally barred your people from ever even observing how to run any of it.
It was structural sabotage. Belgium assumed an uneducated population would just be a docile labor force forever.
But if they had this whole system rigged, why did they suddenly grant independence in 1960? I mean, the texts say they had a 30-year plan published just a few years earlier in 1955.
Yeah, in 55, they still thought they could slow walk the process and keep their monopolies intact into the 1980s. But the geopolitical wind shifted incredibly fast. British PM Harold Macmillan gave his Wind of Change speech in 1960, acknowledging African nationalism was unstoppable.
Right. Ghana had already broken free under Kwame Nkrumah in 1957, Guinea in 58.
Exactly. 1960 alone saw 17 African nations declare independence. Plus, Belgium is watching France get bogged down in a devastating colonial war in Algeria.
And they don't want that. They just want the Katanga mines running smoothly.
Right. So when massive strikes break out in Leopoldville in 1959, Belgium panics. In January 1960, they bring Congolese leaders to Brussels and just totally reverse course. They say, you get independence in 6 months. June 30th.
Which, according to the scholars, was a totally cynical gamble.
Completely. They rushed it on purpose, knowing there was an administrative vacuum. They figured they'd hand over a flag and a national anthem, but the Congolese would be so dependent on Belgian officers and Union Miniere executives that the actual wealth extraction would just continue.
A perfectly engineered neo-colony. They're handing over the keys to a car with no engine, expecting the new owners to immediately hire the Belgian mechanics to push it.
Exactly. And stepping into this impossibly rigged setup is Patrice Emery Lumumba.
Okay, let's talk about Lumumba, because when you look at his bio in the dossier, his rise is just, it's so improbable. He wasn't royalty. He didn't go to university in Paris. He was a postal clerk.
He was born in 1925 in the Kasai province. He was from the Tutela ethnic group, which was actually a huge advantage.
Just a smaller minority,
Yeah.
right? So the big power blocks didn't immediately see him as a tribal threat.
Exactly. And since he couldn't get higher education, he became this massive autodidact. He just read everything: French literature, history, politics. He worked as a postal clerk and a tax official and started writing essays about a unified Congolese dignity.
But the real turning point for him was late 1958.
Yeah, December 1958. He goes to Accra, Ghana, for the All-African People's Conference hosted by Kwame Nkrumah.
The first president of independent Ghana.
Right. And Nkrumah's vision of Pan-Africanism just radicalizes Lumumba. This idea that liberation required total structural unity across the continent, not just regional tribalism.
So he comes back and forms the Mouvement National Congolais, the MNC. And this is so crucial. Why was the MNC so different from the other political parties?
Because the colonial strategy was divide and conquer. They wanted ethnic divisions. You had the Aboko party under Joseph Kasa-Vubu, which was just for the Bakongo people in the west. And you had Konakat, led by Moise Tshombe, which was just protecting the Katanga province's mining interests in the south.
But Lumumba makes the MNC a pan-Congolese national party.
Exactly. He campaigns everywhere. He's an incredible orator, convincing all these groups that their identity is national, not ethnic.
Which is brilliant, but dangerous. Because a divided Congo is super easy for foreign mining companies to control. You just bribe the local strongman.
Right. But a unified Congo, led by a guy demanding total economic sovereignty over the resources, that is an existential threat to foreign profit.
So we get to the May 1960 elections. The MNC wins a plurality. Not a total majority, but enough to form a coalition.
Right, and they strike a tense deal. Kasa-Vubu, the regional guy, becomes president, which is sort of a ceremonial head of state role, and Lumumba becomes the prime minister, the head of government with the actual executive power.
Which brings us to the collision course. June 30th, 1960, Independence Day.
The ceremonies are at the Palais de la Nation in Leopoldville. The global press is there, diplomats from everywhere, and King Baudouin of Belgium gets up to speak.
And this speech, I mean, you read the text in the dossier, and it's just astounding. The sheer tone-deaf colonial arrogance of it.
It wasn't a diplomatic handover, it was a lecture. Baudouin literally ignored all the atrocities and praised King Leopold II as a benevolent civilizer, a liberator.
He's sitting in a room full of Congolese leaders, people who literally bear the physical scars of Leopold's regime, and demanding gratitude.
Right. President Kasa-Vubu gives a polite, pre-approved reply. But then Lumumba, who wasn't even on the official schedule, he stands up and takes the podium.
And he delivers what has to be one of the greatest political speeches of the 20th century.
A total deconstruction of the colonial myth.
Yeah, the dossier has the direct translation. He looks at his people and says, for 80 years, colonialism has stifled and oppressed us. He talks about the mockery, the insults, the blows they endured just because they were black. He says, we have known that the law was never the same for the white man and the black man, accommodating for the one, cruel and inhuman for the other.
And there's a big scholarly debate about this. Like, was this just a spontaneous outburst of anger at the king's insult?
What do the historians say?
Ludo DeWitt and others show pretty strong evidence that Lumumba and his advisors had actually drafted the core of this beforehand.
Ah, so it was a calculated political act.
Exactly. He knew the Belgians wanted a compliant, subservient relationship. By publicly humiliating the king, Lumumba was signaling to his country and the world that the era of compliance was dead. He was demanding true sovereignty.
But the fallout is instantaneous. I mean, to Pan-Africanists, it's this glorious moment of dignity. But to Brussels and Washington...
It was a declaration of war. The Western press immediately starts calling him unstable, a dangerous radical. He put a massive target on his back, literally 12 hours into his term.
So Belgium realizes their gamble failed. Lumumba isn't going to play ball. So they activate the destabilization protocols.
Yeah.
And it starts with the army, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
force public. Because remember, there are 0 Congolese officers. It's still completely run by white Belgians.
Right, so Lumumba is trying to run a country with a military loyal to the guys he just humiliated. That's a
Mm,
ticking time bomb.
And it goes off days later. The Belgian commander, General Emile Janssens, gathers the troops in Leopoldville. He writes on a chalkboard, "Before independence equals after independence."
Wow, just openly telling them, nothing changes. You get no promotions, no pay raises. You still take orders from
It
us.
was a deliberate provocation, and it worked. The Congolese troops mutiny, they rebel against the European officers, chaos spreads, some Belgian civilians are attacked.
Which gives Belgium the perfect excuse to step back in.
Without asking Lumumba's permission, Belgium drops heavily armed paratroopers right back into the Congo. They claim it's to protect Belgian citizens, but really it's an illegal military reoccupation of an independent nation.
And that occupation sets up the real killing blow. July 11th, just 11 days into Lumumba's term, Katanga secedes.
Yes, the economic heart of the country.
I like to think of this like a corporate hostile takeover. Imagine you're a new CEO, right? Day one, the board freezes the bank accounts. The security team riots. And while you're dealing with that, a rival company funded by your old boss just steals your most profitable department, the one that makes 90% of your revenue. How do you even survive that?
Well, you don't. Moise Shom declares Katanga an independent nation. But our sources make it very clear this was not a grassroots nationalist thing. This secession was entirely funded, engineered, and protected by the Belgian state and Union Miniere.
Belgian military officers are literally commanding the Katangese rebel army.
And the mining company is routing all the tax revenue directly to Shom, completely bankrupting Lumumba's government in Leopoldville.
So Lumumba is bankrupt, facing a mutiny, an illegal foreign occupation, and half his country is stolen. He does the only thing he can. He appeals to the United Nations.
He asks Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld to send peacekeepers to kick the Belgians out and crush the secession.
And Hammarskjöld sends troops, but there's a catch, right?
A massive catch. Hammarskjöld uses a legal loophole to deny Lumumba actual help. He says Katanga is an internal political dispute and cites the UN Charter against interfering in domestic issues.
Even though it's clearly funded and run by foreign Belgians.
Total diplomatic hypocrisy. The UN troops essentially build a protective wall around Katanga so the corporate mining can continue in peace, while Lumumba is left to hang.
So Lumumba's completely isolated. The U.S. won't help him. The UN won't help him. In pure desperation, he turns to the Soviet Union.
He asks Moscow for transport planes, trucks, and a few advisors so he can move his own troops toward Katanga.
Now, this is a massive point we need to clear up, based on the scholars in the dossier. De Witt and Zangola and Ntalaja, do they consider Lumumba a communist?
Absolutely not. The historical consensus is unanimous. He had 0 ideological ties to Marxism-Leninism.
This was just pragmatism.
Pure desperation. He needed planes. The Soviets had planes. But in Washington, D.C., in the summer of 1960, nuance did not exist.
Cold War paranoia is at an all-time high.
Right. The CIA station chief in Leopoldville, Lawrence Devlin, starts firing off these frantic cables to Washington. He calls it a classic communist effort takeover. He calls Lumumba a Soviet tool and an African Mussolini.
Wow. African Mussolini.
Yeah. Truth didn't matter. The narrative that the Congo was falling to communism was the perfect ideological cover for a resource war. The Eisenhower administration was terrified the Soviets would get their hands on the Shinkalabwe uranium and the Katanga cobalt.
So that Cold War panic leads straight to the assassination authorization. Let's look at the 1975 U.S. Senate Church Committee findings. Because this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is verified, declassified reality.
Right. The Church Committee found documented proof that in August 1960, President Dwight D. Eisenhower directly authorized the CIA to eliminate Patrice Lumumba.
The sitting president of the United States ordered a hit on a democratically elected foreign head of state who had been in office for mere weeks just because he wanted to control his own country's borders.
It's chilling. CIA Director Alan Dulles cables Devlin, saying Lumumba's removal is an urgent and prime objective. So the CIA sends their top scientist, Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, to the Congo.
And he brings poison, right?
Yeah, a lethal biological toxin engineered to look like a local disease. They literally ordered Devlin to sneak it into Lumumba's food or his toothpaste.
Poison toothpaste. It sounds like a bad spy movie, but it's the official historical record. But the poison plot doesn't actually work out, does it?
No, Devlin couldn't get close enough to Lumumba's inner circle, so he aborted the poison. But the presidential order to eliminate him was still active. They just switched tactics.
From direct assassination to structural destabilization.
Right. Why risk an American assassin when you can just weaponize Lumumba's domestic rivals?
So they used the ceremonial president, Kasa-Vubu.
September 1960. Kasa-Vubu goes on the radio, backed by Western advisors, and illegally dismisses Lumumba as prime minister. Lumumba immediately jumps on the radio and dismisses Kasa-Vubu right back.
So the whole executive branch is paralyzed, and the parliament tries to fix it. They vote to keep Lumumba in power. But the CIA has a backup plan.
Colonel Joseph Mobutu, the army chief of staff.
Who was ironically appointed by Lumumba.
Yeah, but Mobutu had been thoroughly compromised by the CIA and Belgian intelligence. With their money and logistics, Mobutu launches a military coup on September 14th. He suspends parliament, kicks out the Soviets, and puts Lumumba under house arrest.
So Lumumba is trapped in the prime minister's residence. There's a ring of UN peacekeepers supposedly protecting him, but they're surrounded by Mobutu's hostile army.
It's totally untenable. Lumumba knows if he stays in Leopoldville, he's a dead man. So in late November, during a massive rainstorm, he sneaks out in the back of a car.
Trying to get all the way across the country to Stanleyville, where his loyalists are.
Right, but the logistics of crossing a country the size of Western Europe during the rainy season while the army is hunting you, it's practically impossible.
And he gets delayed because he keeps stopping to talk to his supporters along the road.
Because he's a politician at heart. But on December 1st, Mobutu's forces catch him at the Sankuru River.
And the imagery from his capture is broadcast globally, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was psychological warfare. The world saw this brilliant leader, hands tied behind his back, being thrown into a truck and severely beaten by soldiers.
And the UN peacekeepers.
They were there. They stood by and watched, citing Hammarskjöld's strict mandate not to interfere in internal affairs.
Unbelievable. So they lock him up in a military prison in Thiesville. But even behind bars, he's too dangerous. The soldiers guarding him start to mutiny because they sympathize with him.
Exactly. He had this unbearable political gravity. The West realizes they can't just keep him in prison. They have to kill him.
So in January 1961, they make the final logistical decision. They transfer him out of Thiesville, and where do they send him?
To Elizabethville, the capital of Katanga.
Directly into the hands of Moise Chom, the guy running the corporate secession. They're basically FedExing him to his executioner.
And the 2001 Belgian Commission explicitly confirmed that Belgian officials knew exactly what was going to happen, and they provided the logistical support for the flight.
So on January 17, 1961, Lumumba and his two allies, Maurice Mpolo and Joseph Okito, are flown to Katanga. And they're beaten so badly on the plane that the pilot actually complains they're destabilizing the aircraft in flight.
Right. And when they land, who takes command? Katangi's soldiers are there, but the operational commanders are European.
Belgian military and police officers.
Yes. They take them to a colonial villa. They torture them for hours. Chom himself participates. And then, that night, they drive them deep into the bush.
To the execution site.
The firing squad is Katangese, but the men giving the orders are Belgian. Police Commissioner Franz Verscher and Captain Julian Gott. They line up Lumumba, Mpolo, and Okito against a tree in the headlights of police cars.
And they shoot them. Patrice Lumumba is 35 years old, 12 weeks in power, and he's executed by a coalition of colonial corporations and Cold War intelligence agencies.
They throw the bodies in a shallow grave. But, and this is where the logic of the extraction economy gets truly horrifying, a physical body is a threat.
Because it can become a martyr's shrine.
Exactly. If the grave is discovered, it becomes a symbol of resistance forever. So the next day, the Belgians send a police officer named Gerard Soet to fix the problem.
And the logistics of what Soet does, we have to be clinical about this because it shows the exact mindset of these empires. He and his brother jig up the bodies, they hack them apart with saws, and they dissolve the pieces in massive vats of concentrated sulphuric acid.
Acid that was supplied directly from the chemical stockpiles of Union Miniere, the mining company.
The same company pulling the copper and cobalt out of the ground provides the acid to dissolve the prime minister.
Total erasure. And Soete, being just deeply, viciously racist, actually kept a couple of Lumumba's teeth, including a gold-capped molar, as souvenirs.
I mean, just sit with that detail. It's sickening. And then the cover-up starts.
For 40 years, the official story was this absurd lie that Lumumba escaped his cell, stole a car, and was killed by enraged villagers.
Which everyone in Western intelligence knew was a lie because they orchestrated it. But it held for Decades. How did the truth finally break?
It happened in stages. First, the 1975 Church Committee exposed the CIA's initial poison plot, showing Eisenhower's intent. But it didn't fully expose the Belgian firing squad and the acid.
That took until 1999, right?
Yeah, Ludo de Witt published The Assassination of Lumumba, blowing open the classified Belgian archives. He proved the direct operational command by Belgian officers.
And then Gerard Soyd actually goes on TV.
Right around the same time, yeah. He felt so immune from consequences that he bragged about dissolving the bodies on television, and he literally held up the gold tooth on camera.
The arrogance is just, it's beyond belief. That finally forced the 2001 Belgian Commission, right?
Yes, and they concluded Belgium held an irrefutable portion of moral responsibility.
Which is such a weasel phrase, moral responsibility. De Witt points out that when your officers command the firing squad and supply the acid, that's not moral responsibility. That's direct operational complicity in murder.
Exactly. But it protected them legally. Not a single person was ever prosecuted. Eventually, in 2022, Belgium had this surreal ceremony where they returned that single gold tooth to Lumumba's daughter in a little casket.
The only physical piece of him left. But as we wrap up, we have to talk about what this murder actually achieved for the West. Because it wasn't just about killing one guy. It was about killing the future of a nation.
Right. Who fills the vacuum? Colonel Mobutu. He takes absolute power in 1965, renames the country Zaire, and rules as a brutal dictator for 32 years.
And because he crushes any left-wing or nationalist movements, Washington and Brussels absolutely love him. They back him entirely.
And in return, he builds a kleptocracy. While the Congolese people are starving and hospitals have no medicine, Mobutu steals an estimated $15 billion. He's flying the Concorde to Paris to go shopping.
Meanwhile, the foreign mining conglomerates operate exactly as they did before, taking the minerals, routing the profits offshore. The architecture of dependency holds perfectly.
Which brings us right back to today, to the smartphone in your pocket.
Or the battery in your electric vehicle. Those require massive amounts of cobalt for thermal stability. And where is 50% of the world's known cobalt?
The Democratic Republic of the Congo. The exact same supply chains from 1885 are still running today.
We see the modern reports of artisanal mining child labor, tunnel collapses, environmental destruction. Billions of dollars of value going to Western tech companies while the local workers make pennies a day.
It is an unbroken continuum. From Leopold's rubber to the atomic uranium to modern cobalt, maximize extraction, export the wealth, and use instability or violence to make sure the locals never get the power to demand fairness.
Lumumba was killed precisely because he was the one guy smart enough to see the structural trap, and he had the mandate to break it. He wanted national sovereignty over those resources, and for that, he was dissolved in acid.
It really is one of the foundational tragedies of the modern era.
Which leaves us with a massive what if. I want you, the listener, to really think about this. What if the CIA in Belgium had failed? What if Patrice Lumumba's vision of an economically sovereign Congo had survived?
It completely rewrites the 20th century.
Imagine if Kinshasa controlled all that copper and cobalt on their own terms, pricing it fairly on the global market, reinvesting trillions of dollars into their own universities, infrastructure, and technology. If the wealth of the Congo actually belonged to the Congolese, would the geopolitical center of the tech world today be Silicon Valley? Or would it be in Central Africa?
It forces you to question the entire economic hierarchy we just accept as normal today.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive in the OrigineX Human Archives. We really encourage you to go read the verified sources we talked about, the Church Committee report, De Witt's book, then Zungel and Natalaja's research. Do not accept the sanitized versions of history.
Dig into the structures of power.
Because the diagnostic muddy waters of global history are rarely accidental. The X-ray machine of truth wasn't broken. It was intentionally turned off by the architects of the extraction economy. Keep digging, keep questioning, and recognize how the suppressed events of 1960 are actively powering the physical technology in your hands right now.